You are listening to NewVision OldWays, the podcast that explores timeless wisdom for the modern mind in a fun, relaxed, and most important, interactive way with you, the listener. I am your host, Tony Marinaccio, and let's get the episode started. Welcome to the podcast. We have a great episode on tap, but before we get started, I want to once again tell you what we are about to embark on. If you listen to episode number 1, the introduction to this series, you should have a pretty good idea of what I am looking to do, but I also want to make a few things clear. First, I want to make this an interactive podcast. This is very important. I want you, the listener, to be able to share ideas on the subjects, but also feel free to express new angles and ideas. For the true purpose of the podcast is to find better ways to look at life, hopefully solve some difficult problems, and have a healthy and inclusive place for all of us to share ideas, learn from each other, which to me is very important and lacking severely in society today. We don't learn from each other. We just fight each other. And I think we can correct that with a little bit of teamwork. The ways to interact with me and the show are going to be in the show notes, but I will also go over those in detail at the end of today's episode. Secondly, this is a show for all of us. It's about us. It's about our past, our present, and our future. And it's not just a history lesson, for I am not a history teacher, nor am I pretending to be one. My personality will be in this for sure. I do have a bit of a sarcastic humor, certainly not meant to offend, but I am who I am, and I am real. I am honest, and even more important, I am a seeker, like you, a true seeker of better ways to help as many people as possible. So with that in mind, let's start episode 2, the Stoic virtues and what we can learn from them. The Stoics and Stoicism. Who were they, and why the heck are we talking about them, and what is the foundation of their beliefs? Stoicism originated in ancient Greece and later gained prominence in Rome. It's a philosophy that emphasizes virtue, wisdom, and resilience in the face of all life's challenges. The more famous, relevant Stoics were Seneca, Epictetus, and commonly referred to as the last great Stoic, Marcus Aurelius, who was the emperor of Rome from 161 to 180 AD. And I say that mainly to give you a good idea of when these theories were mainly developed. But as you will see, they are very relevant to today. There are many theories from this time that we could delve into, but for now, I want to concentrate on the 4 virtues that the Stoics held so dear, but remain more relevant than ever 2,000 years later. So I am sure you are at the edge of your seats begging me to tell you what the 4 Stoic virtues are. So here they are: wisdom, courage, temperance, and justice. We will focus on these today and dig into how they can help us in our modern world. The Stoic beliefs are mainly considered pagan beliefs, but they are shared across many theologies and religion. But the most common is virtue, and that is why I chose to concentrate on them. Stoic philosophy is also believed to be the original inspiration for cognitive psychotherapy. And as we will see, humans in our most basic form don't really change that much from who we are and what our basic needs are, even 2,000 years later. These virtues are as important as ever. And here's the thing, more lacking than ever as well, causing, I believe, so many of the issues that we have today. All 4 of these virtues relate to each other, but the first 2 have a deep connection as well as the last 2, but they all feed off each other. And we will see how that works in a little bit. So without further ado, let's dig into these and see why they are all still so important and why we need to instill these back into our society. And the first one we're going to talk about is wisdom. The Stoics, when referring to wisdom, described it partly as the space between stimulus and response. It's that moment when anything happens, and you have that sometimes brief moment to decide how are you going to respond. And it's akin to the sports analogy of the game seems to slow down for him or her, and they make a great play when others tend to fail or panic in these situations. You hear that all the time with sports greats like Wayne Gretzky, Michael Jordan, Tom Brady, and tennis great Serena Williams. They all had a few things in common that made them great, their own version of the 4 Stoic virtues, and you will see why as we go. So the Stoics believed wisdom ultimately informs action. In this realm, wisdom isn't just book knowledge. It's the equivalent of, for lack of a better modern term, street knowledge. Not the I know how to score an ounce knowledge, but the everyday wisdom that so many, especially young people, just so lack in today's world. We know that so many come from broken homes where they lack true life guidance. And we all know, to whatever extent, we are a product of our environment. If we don't have engaged parents, proper education, kids are growing up with a lack of basic life wisdom, which causes them to act, and we've all seen it, impulsively and irrationally. Wisdom is harnessing what the philosophy teaches us, then being able to apply it to everyday life. How many times do you see families in stores with kids seemingly uncontrollable, in churches, schools, at home, anywhere? My favorite parenting excuse is, we don't believe in telling our kids no. Folks, we all know what that is. It's people that don't want to parent, period. It's an excuse to not have to deal with the juvenile explosion they cause by not teaching them, guess what? Everyday wisdom. I know that will offend a few of you, but frankly, sometimes saying no is as much showing love as saying yes. No can mean to a child, it may hurt now, but you'll understand why later. But you cannot start the no's at 15. By then, good luck reversing course. It has to start from birth. And in far too many cases, these kids are not getting that. I get it. We all have different circumstances. I understand that. But wisdom, as opposed to book knowledge, is so valuable with how a person deals with life. And I go back to what we talked about at the beginning of wisdom, which is, as the Stoics believed, wisdom is the space between stimulus and response. That brief moment when you have a decision to make and how you're going to react and deal with something. And in so many times, people go straight to the extremes with nothing in between, and they lack any self-control whatsoever, which leads us to the very relatable temperance, the number 2 Stoic virtue. Stoics often use temperance interchangeably with self-control. In the Stoic sense, you need wisdom. Remember, that's the ability to know how to react in a different situation, to have self-control. How many times do we see videos of people getting pulled over for something minor, but because they lack the basic wisdom of how to react to that situation, they have no self-control, and they make the situation way worse than it needed to be. You see it growing in schools with kids overreacting to a teacher, calling them out for their behavior. And then they can't help but act irrationally because they lack any temperance or self-control. Epictetus, a great Stoic philosopher, said, "Curb your desire. Don't set your heart on so many things, and you will get what you need." In other words, focus on what's important, and that's difficult to do when you lack basic wisdom to do so. You end up focusing on what is seen on social media, on what you don't have, and seeing extreme behavior without seeing the consequences that come from it. Having temperance guards against those extremes. And in today's world, it seems like things get to the extremes so easily when they just don't have to. But it's now being used as a tool to get what they want. And they is anyone who uses the extreme to, simply as a tool to scare someone or the masses into complying with things they know are wrong, but are too scared to push back now because he who screams the loudest gets heard. Doesn't mean they are correct, just the loudest. Having wisdom and knowledge helps us guard against such extreme behavior. But who is there instilling these virtues in our youth, in young adults who have no direction? The great Martin Luther King Jr. once said, "We must use time creatively in the knowledge that the time is always right to do right." And that is worth repeating. We must use time creatively in the knowledge that the time is always right to do right. And if we can begin to, once again, install wisdom and temperance in our youth, they will know that doing right is for themselves and their communities going to benefit them more than only acting on feelings and frustrations. We are too busy allowing feelings to guide our way, instead of learning that the world cannot be a place where feelings overshadow facts and truth. And the ridiculousness of the cancel culture exists merely to further an agenda or to get attention. Instead, wisdom and temperance should be used to fend off those attacks. But the fight against that takes courage. And guess what? Courage is the number 3 Stoic virtue. Courage, in the Stoic sense, doesn't mean being able to do something militarily heroic. It means having the courage to do right even in the face of ridicule, or like Marcus Aurelius, Emperor of Rome, had a continuous battle with himself, not allowing absolute power to corrupt him, but to improve his abilities and help others. And he had the courage to do so. Courage stems also from having the wisdom and the temperance to be able to understand the situation you are in and make the proper decisions. Without that proper understanding, so often we see people make irrational decisions, of course, more times than not, leading to a terrible outcome. We see people of all ages lack the courage to be themselves and seek true knowledge about events that shape their lives. A great example of this, we were guilted into believing that during the worst days of COVID, even if we just asked questions about the information we were being fed, we should be ashamed of ourselves and just do what we were told. People feared speaking out due to the fear of being publicly and privately shamed. But as we all know, now anyway, so much of that info should have been questioned, and it was wrong or at least distorted to fit a particular narrative. Courage to get informed and make proper decisions about subjects is vital, and yet we see a few scream and threaten the loudest. They cause only chaos, offer no true solutions to any issue, and the rest of us, the majority, are just supposed to grin and bear it, right? But if we as a community use courage with the proper wisdom and temperance, we can in fact unite the masses, solve what seems unsolvable, and move things ahead. Without this, we fight because we are a house divided. We stay locked in dissension and nothing improves, or it just gets worse. And doing what's right does not prevail. And that leads us right into the last of the 4 virtues, justice. And of the 4 virtues, Marcus Aurelius felt this was the most important, the crowning glory of the virtues. And Cicero, a Roman senator, didn't consider justice in the legal sense, but in the broader scope of our interactions just with each other, our fellow man. Epictetus, and this I feel sums up living a just life perfectly, he said, seeking the very best in ourselves means actively caring for the welfare of other human beings. In other words, what injures the hive injures the bee. An example of this is our growing homelessness crisis. In various cities across our nation, we see elected officials not helping alleviate the problem, but almost inexplicitly making the problem worse and blaming it on others for an obvious political agenda. Using people as pawns, hurting the hive injures the bee. What we all do matters to our own universe. And by our own universe, I mean our families, our communities, our country, and our world. I believe that so many people, young and older, don't seek the best in themselves. We are now blaming everything we feel is wrong in our own lives on someone or something else, instead of controlling what we can, improving our own lives, and learning every day. We are not learning. We are just blaming with no solutions. Justice or living a just life will come naturally if we all expect more of ourselves and what we will accept. We as a country have many examples of this. I mean, our founding fathers had the courage to fight the war against the tyranny of Great Britain and gain our independence. And as a country, we fought each other in the Civil War, brother against brother, neighbor against neighbor, at a terrible cost to right a horrible wrong that was slavery. And when people said it couldn't be done, we fought for the civil rights in the 1960s, all because we had gained the wisdom, temperance, courage to right those wrongs and to live a more just existence. It may seem like I'm also at times generalizing parents and educators, but I do believe we do have some amazing parents and educators out there. But there is a disturbing trend of uninterested parents educators and school boards with crazy agendas, and a media bent on scaring our youth into depression and anxiety. We are building the beast out of our youth instead of preparing them for life. They are trained blamers, excuse makers, and unable to cope with even the slightest disruption in their day. But by concentrating on the 4 Stoic virtues, we can again move our country forward by, as I mentioned earlier, expecting more from ourselves. I cannot stress that enough. Let's stop lowering the bar. Let's instead bring each other up by not taking the easy way out of everything and changing things simply by having some unity and wanting to. As the Stoics believed, to want to do good, and for a person being human to not want to harm other human beings. This is the most honorable lesson, and it makes just people out of those who learn it. And there you have it, the 4 Stoic virtues. But how do we better serve these virtues, no matter what political party you attach yourself to, no matter what religion you identify with, no matter who you are, color of your skin, none of that matters. These virtues were true 2,000 years ago, and they are just as, if not more so, true now. Once you have incorporated these virtues into your life and daily routine, you can then consider the Stoic practice of premeditatio malorum, or premeditation of evils. Why is this important? Well, this involves mentally preparing for potential setbacks and adversities, thereby fortifying our resilience and inner peace. In essence, allowing us to approach difficulties with clarity and composure, rather than succumbing to fear and despair. And in this crazy, exhausting, chaotic world, anything we can do to reduce our fear and despair is an incredible help to all of us. So, what do you think? What are your ideas on how to manifest these virtues back into our society? I'd love to hear from you, and here's how you can do it. Email me with your ideas. I'm hoping we can be constructive with our comments, and I want to hear from all walks of life. And that email is newvisionoldways@gmail.com. Once again, it's newvisionoldways@gmail.com. You could follow me on X, or what was Twitter and now X, at NewVisionOldWays. And we are on Facebook too. If you type in New Vision space Old Ways podcast, you should be able to easily find us. And all of these are in the show notes. And also, if you can do me a huge favor and like or subscribe to the podcast, but even more important, leave a review, especially if it's a good review. That will help obtain guests as we go along, and that is very important for us, and it would be so appreciated. So I cannot wait till we get together for the next show. Until then, be safe, be cool to each other, and let's change the world.